Hello, and that is right. Today we are looking at QTS 5.2 in beta. QNAP have rolled out the latest big update to their software, and it's got a whole bunch of quality of life improvements, a few security improvements, definitely SMB improvements, and the way the structure of some items have been laid out within the QTS GUI there via the web browser. Again, as usual, we've done a whole breakdown of all of the improvements that have been rolled in here. It's linked in the description below, and it goes through every single one of those improvements, big and small, and you can check those out. And we'll be highlighting some of the quality of life improvements throughout this video. But before we go any further, before you go ahead and install this on your QNAP, do keep in mind, 1, we're talking about beta. 2, if you are using integral data in any shape or form, irreplaceable data or data on your system that's for business, do not upgrade to a beta. Betas are not stable, they are not final release, and nor is this. It's not even an RC. And lastly, if you do not have a decent backup strategy in place, do not download a beta and run your data on a beta software. That would be madness. But that's enough of the old TNC. You want to hear about what's in QTS 5.2. Straight away, I'll say the GUI certainly feels a great deal more responsive. Whether it is you're utilizing it for the login, log out, just the system maintenance, or opening up multiple applications at once, it definitely feels snappier. Not absolutely loads, but definitely as we go through different applications and services and features, they are being a great deal more responsive as they boot them all up. Some of them, there are exceptions to the rule. Applications such as Multimedia Console that needs to index against different applications within the system, or applications like this one in Security Council that's actually made up of multiple apps that are running via a single portal, and we will be returning to this application very, very soon, are improved, but they aren't improved as well as the standalone applications. If you're interested in new apps and services being added, there's actually not that many. QNAP have seemingly preferred to refocus on a number of their existing applications and improve upon them, which is going to be good news for many, but I think there are some people, when they hear about a brand new big software version, are always thinking about what are the new bells and whistles. I'll say straight away, there have been improvements made to things like the USB camera application. Apparently that has had an overhaul in its GUI. There are improvements that have been made with regards to SMB that we'll talk about later on, with dedicated apps on that and on the antivirus software. And that's really it. In terms of adding extra apps, there isn't that many. It's really just upgrade to what the status quo already is. So when it comes to storage and your NAS, I think a lot of users these days kind of take it as a rule of thumb to always have snapshots running. QTS 5.2 not only integrates and continues kind of optimization of snapshots, but what's more interesting is now you can get a decent understanding of just what the savings can be if you choose to make just little cuts around your storage system in snapshots to reclaim some data. Maybe you've got days, weeks, months, potentially even years of different versions of snapshots in place, and you're thinking about making some savings. Well, now you can go ahead utilizing this new size calculator to work out just what savings are possible. So for example here, if I go ahead and look into the history of my snapshots and I look at a customized period of time, say for example I'll go in for the whole of April there, and then from there I can go ahead and find out just what the savings would be available to me if I deleted some of those snapshots. Again, not something you should really do if you're taking a snapshot seriously, but if you have been running it for a very long time and you're wondering about an over-reliance on a retention policy and therefore savings potentially being possible, this might be quite a useful little feature of QTS 5.2 for your long-term snapshots that, might make you think about upgrading. Another neat advantage that use shared folders over the case of Samba or SMB are those of you that want to be able to take advantage of the new synchronization to disk feature over SMB when requested. Ultimately, what this means is data will be synced between the target drive and the NAS immediately rather than waiting for periodic synchronization there. It can impact performance, it has to be said, but still nonetheless, having that option there, I think, particularly for those that use map network drives, is going to be beneficial long term, and particularly those that have got a high creation rate of data as well. And this can be applied to both new folders if you choose to. Alternatively, heading into the control panel, you can go ahead, select any pre-existing shared folders, go down to the bottom, and this option is immediately available there as well. Likewise, those of you that use systems such as SMB to edit directly on the QNAP NAS, perhaps you're using a 10GB NIC and you're applying directly to M2 NVMe storage there have been improvements made in some of the SMB configuration options there to really tweak things up quite significantly, with new options added to really improve efficiency and overall performance numbers, all being added into SMB 1 to 3. Indeed, that focus on SMB extends all the way along to it now having its own standalone area on the system that allows you to micromanage the update and access patterns and pretty much monitor your SMB protocol there for any kind of updates or any additional improvements that have happened on the SMB protocol over time without just trying to rely on the overview and updates of the whole of QTS. But not all the modifications and upgrades that have occurred in QTS 5.2 are massive. Some of them are high requested or quality of life improvements. Great example, if you go into the iSCSI manager there, if you've got a pre-existing iSCSI target in a LUN, you're always able to adapt and modify some elements of your LUN storage space depending on the original configuration, but you could never really do much with the targets. If you'd done an erroneous target, got it wrong, gave away too much information or more, there was a limit to how much you could modify. Luckily now you can go ahead and change that name if you choose. It's very easy and it allows you to activate those changes without changing a lot of the configuration of that iSCSI target and therefore nullify the LUNs that you've built upon it. Another notable quality of life improvement that's worth touching on, and definitely as someone that provides support to both home users and business users remotely and on site, sometimes I have to ask users to provide me a lot more of their network information in order to figure out if there are any issues, conflicts, that sort of thing. And luckily now it's become a great deal more straightforward. For example, here if I wanted a user to send me the full information on a pre-existing setup that they've got, they can go ahead now and in a single click copy all of that information directly into a single copy-paste action, which means, for example, if they've got a subnet mask issue or that the dynamic IP, which has now become a static IP, they haven't got all of that ready information to hand to send to me, now it's going to be a great deal easier to supply that information as well as monitor it and keep track of it yourself. Another small quality of life improvement that actually harked back to a situation I was assisting about 9 months ago is to do with two-step authentication. We're all saying that we need it and we should have it on everything, whether you are an admin or not. But what if you've got multiple users and employees that are using two-step authentication? Up until now, if you were an admin super user, it actually wasn't that straightforward or indeed possible in some cases to disable remotely a user's two-step authentication without destroying the whole account and having to start from scratch. Luckily now you can go ahead and not only enforce two-step authentication, something you could do before, but also disable two-step authentication remotely from outside of that account. Again, there are going to be some users that question the validity of this, but if you've had multiple employees and from time to time you need to be able to utilize their account, be it that they've been dismissed as a member of staff or that they're unavailable to disable that, it's good to know that an admin user can actually circumnavigate that two-step authentication from the outside. The antivirus application ClamAV has also been improved as a standalone application, therefore diminishing resource utilization during scans and just general background quarantine handling. The small quality of life improvements continue. What if you want to reset the system? A lot of us want to utilize these systems like you would an OS on your Windows or Mac machine and periodically every year or two reset everything to factory defaults, give it a bit of shine and clear all the deadwood from what's going on. Up until now, when you wanted to do something like that, you would generally have to reset to the admin account, and when you go to a factory default, what would normally happen is you can go ahead and reset all of the data but keep some of the general settings all the way down to factory level to save yourself some time, but you don't really want to do that and have to reset the admin account. So luckily now when you do that in QTS 5.2, it will invite you to retain the new created admin account or the super user account that you created rather than being reliant on that admin and MAC address passworded account when you restore. Another change that may please some and annoy others is the change now with regards to creating a new volume. When you create a new volume on these systems, generally up until now, it was always by default that after selecting things like scale, volume encryption, block size, that kind of thing, that the next step would always by default enable snapshots. But there are still, despite personally liking to the utilization of snapshots, there are users out there that don't like to use them because they're running on limited space, and having that option disabled by default will mean that when they do go ahead and create their volume, they're not going to have to worry about reversing decisions on snapshots that may be utilizing space less efficiently than they desire. Again, not for everyone. I personally use snapshots pretty much every single time, but I know I can't speak for everyone. But probably one of the most interesting add-ons in QTS 5.2 that I would argue should have been there sooner than it is in the Security Center, the new Unusual File Activity Monitor. This one's so good that I'm probably going to make a dedicated video on this very, very soon. As the name suggests, this is a back-end tool working within the Security Center application, which, by the way, I still believe should be a default tool and not an optional tool. This allows you to set certain triggers within the system dedicated to different storage areas. So I've only got the one volume right now, but within that one volume, what I can do if I choose is use some of the default settings here if I choose to trigger the system locking down data and locking down access if certain file activities take place. So that means if I go over here on the right hand side, I can choose, and it takes a week to get enough baseline information, so it's got comparative data there, hence why I'm going to make a dedicated video on this. Imagine a scenario where you are being hit by a ransomware agent. Something has got in and they are wrapping up your data to try and get some ransomware money out of you. For those who aren't aware, ransomware, when it does impact NAS, is generally when the entire content of your NAS is zipped up with archival tools such as 7-zip and the like, but these tools have a password generated that is deleted from the system, and you end up having to pay the attacker to get that unlock key. Now, a tool like this, the Unusual File Activity Monitor, what it would do would notice, and it would notice if multiple files are being modified en masse in a way that isn't considered normal behavior by the system user. And if that threshold is triggered, the system will lock down. It will either lock out that user or it will lock down the file access there. As you can see, there's violations and attempted violation numbers, just like you find in the IP locking and auto blocking tools built in. But this is a very interesting tool that I'm going to be going into more detail on, because I think once I see just the potential of this, this could be a real page turner of an application for QTS 5.2, and something that QNAP should really have rolled out more than a year ago. A great many more of the upgrades and improvements in QTS 5.2 are kind of hard to show you here on screen. For example, here in the article on NAS Compares, if you scroll down to the bottom, it will be linked in the description, you can find out more information about all of those individual improvements, some of which are based on using particular SED SSD, some of which are based on utilizing domain, some of them are just simply based on different protocols being supported, such as now FileStation supporting WEB and WebP files there for displaying that information. Same goes if you're going to be using Office files, improving the thumbnail and indexing display there. Ultimately, all of these improvements are always going to be a good thing, because QNAP's platform, QTS, ever since 5.1 and 5.0, I always felt needed some of these quality of life improvements over 4.3. They seemingly overhauled a lot of it, but not all of it. And it's nice to see a number of these in here. But the one that really stood out for me on top of all of these that I want to test for you in today's video is this one. The improved speed of starting up and stopping applications during system startup, shutdown and restart. Because I'll be straight with you, it's a criticism we've leveled towards QNAP quite a lot over the years. Their systems take a while to power down and reboot. And I know a number of you are thinking, well, this is a 24/7 system, Rob. Who cares? As long as it's on and accessible, I always want to be able to access it. I'm not going to be powering it down. I beg to differ, because periodically there's going to be firmware updates. Firmware updates require you to update the system, and you want these to be rather seamless. So the speed of the system powering down and powering up is paramount. So what I wanted to do is, I had this particular system prior to it being set up with QTS 5.2 ready with all of these applications installed. We've got a TS264 NAS here. This is a quad-core Intel CPU NAS with 8 GB of memory, and I've gone ahead and installed absolutely loads of applications. We've got about 25 to 30 different apps all running right now live on this system. Indeed, if we go into the CPU resource monitor on this system, you're going to be able to see that we are using a decent amount of system hardware right now. I wanted to make sure that we had a lot of applications just to really quantify what these improvements actually are, rather than a NAS that had barely any apps installed. Now, obviously, if I didn't have all these apps, the system would boot up and power down significantly quicker, much like you find with a lot of other alternate devices from other brands. But as you can see, we're using almost half of the available memory, and in terms of processes, the system is running absolutely loads right now. This system is running the old firmware, and what I'm going to do is conduct some recordings here of this system booting up and powering down. with the old firmware and the new QTS 5.2 beta software, just to see what the improvements are on this same NAS. So let's see how they compared side by side in terms of the amount of time each one took. Now, rather than make you wait through the entire boot up and boot down of these, I've sped things up for you, and I'm just going to give you the skinny. Straight away, there was in total 46 individual applications that had to be shut down during the full cut down of these systems, and those 46 applications would need to be rebooted upon boot with both QTS 5.1 and 5.2. Now, I'm pleased to say that with regard to shutting down, there was definitely an enormous difference. The new QTS 5.2 version managed to power down in just 1 minute and 59 seconds, which is, more than half the 4 minutes and 17 seconds the QTS 5.1 OS equipped QNAP did. So already a marked improvement there. And again, do bear in mind, 1 minute 59 seconds, 2 minutes may seem like a lot, but again, factor in, we're talking about 46 individual applications that have to be securely shut down, not just the storage. Now, with rebooting these systems from a cold boot, I will say straight away that initially I didn't really see the big difference. Both of them were being booted on exactly the same IP they were on before, but with different versions of QTS on them. And the QTS 5.2 newer OS booted the initial base of the system in 3 minutes and 15 seconds, whereas the QTS 5.1 in 3 minutes 37 seconds. Only about 22 seconds of difference between them for the initial baseline OS boot, but that didn't include the 46 applications. Now from there, that is where the improvements in QTS 5.2 did shine through, because to get all 46 applications and the system at the same level of base readiness took significantly quicker on QTS 5.2, taking a total of 5 minutes and 59 seconds to boot up the system and all 46 apps, whereas in the case of the older QTS 5.1, it took a total of 8 minutes 58 seconds. So again, a gain there of around 3 minutes, which again you are going to feel if you're running that many applications, and nonetheless if you didn't have those applications, even if you're only running a handful, these are still notably improved boot up and shut down times compared with that of the older generation software, not this beta. Overall, I'll say I like what I'm seeing in QTS 5.2 here. It's on a massive upheaval over that of the previous version, and this is still a beta, but things such as being able to monitor and get some real-time information about how much space those snapshots are occupying, and if you disable and delete periods of time within your snapshots rather than deleting the files wholesale, getting that real-time information before you do it will be beneficial. The improvements in shutdown times as well as boot up times are always going to be welcome, and I definitely like the improvement in that security counselor that allows that periodic changes in file behavior that would be triggered in the event of things like ransomware attacks. The other improvements, small as they might be, things as the naming convention changes, if you choose to, in your iSCSI targets. Changing some of the SMB protocols there is not going to be for everyone. It all depends how much or how little you use your system, but still nonetheless it's nice that QNAP are improving upon what is there rather than try to implement brand new things and sticking in a bunch of raw beta stuff that could be unstable. This is the QNAP I want to see. Now this is still a beta, so if you are going to test out this software, I mentioned it in the intro and I'll say it again, do not do this if you are running integral data. Do not do this if you do not have a rigorous backup strategy in place. But there are definitely some improvements there that I think a number of you will take advantage of. And remember, if you want to learn more about the improvements that have come in on QTS 5.2 and the changes that have been made, find the article linked in the description. We go through every single one of them in painful detail, and check out that follow-up video coming very, very soon. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'll see you next time.